Hello and welcome once again to another episode of the Selling Greenville podcast. I'm your host, Stan McCune, realtor here in Greenville, South Carolina. And just a reminder, as always, you can find all of my contact information in the show notes. Feel free to reach out to me by phone, text, email for any of your real estate needs. And as always as well, don't forget, if you like this podcast, to go ahead and subscribe to it. Make sure you don't miss any future episodes. We're on a lot of different platforms: Google Play, Audio Boom, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Make sure you subscribe. You don't want to miss this wonderful content that I'm trying to bring you guys every week. And if you really like the content, please give us a rating. Go ahead and review the podcast. Those things are awesome. We love that. I love that. That really helps motivate me to create even better content than what we've been doing. Today we're going to do something a little bit different. I'm just going to be telling a story from the field, a story from the real estate field out there. People love stories. I love to tell them. And sometimes what happens in order to get a deal to closing is not what you would think. And this story piggybacks very closely, follows very closely the episode that we did on backup offers and backup contracts. And so I think it fits nicely into some of what we talked about just recently. And so I'd like to go ahead and share this one with you guys. This is the deal that just closed recently for one of my real estate clients. And they were a client that was looking for a new real estate investment, something cheap, something safe, something that they might be able to flip or maybe turn into a short-term rental property like an Airbnb or something like that. We had a lot of different directions that we could go in, and I've shown them several different properties, and we had attempted to acquire some, and there was some back and forth, and nothing had really worked out. And so I was, as it turns out, looking at the comps for one of the properties that we were going to look at. I always like to, just as part of my prep work, because even though I have pretty good knowledge of the market, I always like to run comps before doing a showing as well. Get a better sense. What is this specific area, or what is this specific neighborhood? In some cases, what is this specific street doing in the past year? What are the comparable sales from the past year? And I'll look at that just to make sure that I'm prepared for the showing. That's just, to me, part of the job. And I was doing that for a showing that I was doing for this investor client. And as it turns out, I saw in one of the comps was a property that was listed in the MLS as under a contingency contract. Now, there are a few different statuses that we can have in the Greenville MLS. And there are really two specifically that can be utilized when a property is under contract. There is the contingency contract status, and that means just what it is. It's under contract, but it has some type of contingency. And in the MLS, we have to specify what that contingency is, whether it's inspections, whether it's financing, whatever the case may be. Then there's also the pending status, and depending on who you talk to, no pun intended, depending on who you talk to, pending can mean different things to different people. I take it to mean a step beyond the contingency contract status. In other words, if it goes from contingency contract to pending, that means it's very likely to close. That means that most of the, if not all of the contingencies have already been satisfied. Now we are going to closing. The thing that makes it a little bit of a weird thing in the Greenville MLS is that some realtors will start with one or the other and never change it. So they might start with pending, even though there are contingencies, or they might start with contingency contract and then never switch it over to pending. For me, I like to, if there are contingencies, I like to start with the contingency contract status. And then at some point, once really the main contingencies are over with, then I'll switch it to pending. And that just is a way for me to communicate to people on the outside, looking in, hey, this is looking like it's probably going to close unless something unusual happens. but not everyone does that. So as I'm looking at the comps for this property that we're going to show, I see a property that is under contingency contract, and it's been under contingency contract for a while. So that could mean that either the listing agent didn't switch it over to pending, but it's about to close, or, who knows what. It could mean a variety of different things. But one of the possibilities is that there's something wrong with this. It's still showing contingency, and the listing agent is kind of saying that on purpose, kind of leaving it out there on purpose. He might not necessarily be able to say, hey, there are problems here, that you're not really supposed to do that. If a potential buyer is giving you problems for whatever reason. But, some listing agents may leave it under contingency contract for a longer period of time as kind of to show that red flag that there is an issue here. So I pulled it up, and I look at when's the closing date. Oh, and it turns out the closing date was supposed to be really soon. I look at when was the inspection period. Well, the inspection period had already ended quite a bit ago, and this had been under contract for several weeks now. And I could tell based on the property, this is a property that's down to the studs and has done a lot of demo work. It's not going to be a sorry about that. My phone just dinged from a text message coming in. It's not going to be the type of property that you're going to get financing on. I mean, maybe you could get hard money on it, but the vast majority of people that would be purchasing a property like this would be doing so with cash. So there's no reason why it should be taking weeks upon weeks to get to closing. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to make a phone call here and see what's going on. So I call the agent and reach out to him. And I'm like, hey, I was looking at this property, and I just noticed that, you've been under contingency contract for a long time, and it seems like the type of property that would have already closed by now. Is there something going on with that? And he said, well, you wouldn't believe it. I'm really amazed that you called me today, because for that property, we're supposed to close tomorrow, but I can't reach either the buyer or his agent. And it's been like that for about a week now. And we don't know if we're going to actually close tomorrow, but this buyer has been dragging things out as much as possible. And right now we're really concerned that we're not going to get to closing. And so I was like, well, I have a client that has been looking for this type of property, and it checks off a lot of boxes for him. Would you guys consider a backup offer? And he said, well, yeah, we got a bunch of offers the first time around. The one that we settled with was a good offer that was cash and whatnot. But again, the buyer has just been giving us problems. But I think that the seller would definitely entertain backup offers. So I go back to my client and discuss it with him. And he was like, yeah, let's go ahead and let's look at that one after we look at the other one. The one that I was originally looking at when I was pulling comps. So we go and we look at a few different properties that day. And the one that was under the contingency contract had a lot of things going for it. And it really did seem to check off a lot of boxes. And so the next day I reached out to the agent and I was like, hey, I think we're definitely going to put a backup offer in on that. If, assuming that you guys didn't close, did you guys end up closing? Because he was supposed to close on that day. It was a Friday. And he said, well, no, we did not close. We did finally reach out to, we did finally get a hold of the buyer's agent, and they said they almost got everything figured out. They ran into a financial issue. They had provided proof of funds, and then, prior to going under contract, and then they went and spent that money on something else. And now, they have money that's coming in, but it's just not in yet. And so they asked to extend for a couple of weeks, and we went ahead and we told them, okay, we'll go ahead and extend that for a couple of weeks. And extended the contract, and we've already got all that in writing. That was a bit of a downer for me. But again, I've been in this situation before, and I know when buyers start to get fishy like that, usually it doesn't work out. So I was like, well, listen, I think we're still going to put a good backup offer in here, and hopefully we can get under contract. And I don't hope for your sake that your primary contract falls through. But if it does, and we've got that backup ratified, we can close in just a couple of weeks. And so that's what we did. We submitted a backup offer. My client actually asked if we should go up to a certain price, and I recommended actually submitting an offer lower than what he was asking, because again, the beauty about being a buyer or submitting a backup offer is it's unlikely that you have much competition. And in this case, from my communication with the listing agent, I knew there was no competition. So if the seller didn't like the backup offer, he could just counter the backup offer. So we put forward the backup offer, and a very straightforward, very clean offer. And the seller accepted that as a backup without any counter, without any issues at all. So now it's just a waiting game. Now we've got a few weeks to try to see what's going on. And so, we wait our time, and about half a week prior to when they were supposed to close, again, on a Friday, I reach out to the listing agent, and I'm like, hey, just haven't heard from you guys in a while. Just wanted to check in and see what was going on. And the listing agent says, we are still having issues, and I do not think that this is going to close. But what I found out recently, not from the buyer or from the buyer's agent, but from the closing attorney, is that now there is a bank involved, and now he's trying to get some type of creative financing in order to finance this deal. And I was like, well, the contract that you have with this guy, that says that he's purchasing it for cash, right? And I mean, that's a material aspect of the contract. People choose to, and again, I'm not a lawyer, but from a realtor standpoint, I consider that a material aspect of the contract. Sellers decline contracts contingent on financing to accept contracts that don't have financing strictly because a non-financed offer, a cash offer, is a stronger offer. Like, that's a major part of the consideration. So I was like, to me, if I were in your shoes, I would be thinking about that as being a breach of contract. And the agent thought for a second. He was like, you kind of got a point there. And honestly, I just want to move on from these people. They've been a nightmare. I don't think they're ever going to close. So he was like, let me talk to my broker about this and let me see what's going on. I failed to mention before, they had also gotten some extra earnest money from the buyer in order to extend the contract that they had. So that was another factor that had to be worked out. So the next day, the listing agent calls me back, and he says, we are done. The buyer agreed to go ahead and sign a release of contract. The buyer fully admitted that it was not going to happen, that he had committed a breach of contract, that he could not provide the cash, that he, threw up a Hail Mary to try to get financing at the end, but was willing to, rather than drag it out for several more days to get to closing, was willing to just go ahead and release and terminate the contract. And so then at that point, technically, we already have the backup offer. Technically, that is already a backup contract. We went ahead and just signed an addendum just to fully make sure that everyone had, just all of our T's crossed and all of our I's dotted, all of those things, just to be 100% above board, because that's the world that we live in. We need to make sure that everything is 100% on board when it comes to these real estate contracts. And then my client went under contract. So now my client then had a due diligence period and a period of doing title work and all of that. The due diligence period went great. Of course, we had we'd already been out there. He had already been out there with a contractor. We'd already done some of the due diligence. Again, this is some of the nice things about submitting a backup offer is that, as long as the seller is okay with you looking at the property, you can kind of get some of your due diligence out of the way prior to your offer becoming the primary. The only thing is you might be wasting your time. If the primary contract ends up working out and your backup contract never ends up, becoming the primary, then any due diligence work that you've done is just a waste of time. So you don't want to do all your due diligence up front. And particularly, you don't want to be spending money on inspections and all of that. But had done a little bit that wasn't very time or labor intensive. Everything went smoothly, very easy, about as easy of a transaction as you could possibly get. My client now has a great property that he's got a few different options that he can do with that. We'll see if he ends up flipping it or maybe turning it into some type of a rental property, short-term or long-term rental. Again, those of you that have listened to this podcast a lot, that I preach all the time, buy investment properties that have multiple exit strategies. That is always the best way to go. If you can buy a property that you could easily flip, or that you could sell as is, or that you could turn into a variety of different rentals, those are the best possible properties because you're not tied down to one strategy. Now, if you've got a niche and you've done this for a long time and okay, this is what I do well, and I'm just going to keep, I do mobile home parks very well. I know right away if a mobile home park is going to be the right fit and whether the numbers work, then absolutely, by all means, be decisive. Don't worry about the multiple exit strategy rule. But for a lot of investor clients that haven't done as many real estate deals as others, having that flexibility can be crucial. This is the perfect property for that. And as I said in my Backup Offers podcast, that really is a great strategy for investors. There's a lot you can look at some of these deals, and that one, I'll be honest, my client said I pulled a rabbit out of the hat, pulling that off. And that's true to an extent, but obviously there was luck involved as well. I would not have noticed that property if I hadn't been, looking at the comps for another property. And there's a lot of properties out there that have been under contract for a while, and I don't necessarily call on every one of them. But that can be, if you're looking for investment properties or looking for, properties that fit a specific criteria, I really do think, like I said in the Backup Offers episode, that is an option that investors tend to not think about as much. That a large percentage of properties that are distressed, that are being sold on the open market and have issues, whether they're just in really bad shape or they've got they've got squatters living in them or whatever the case may be, a lot of those, the first contract on them doesn't work out. And so if you see one of them that you really, really like go under contract, or if you see one that's been under contract for a while, that could be a prime opportunity for a backup offer. And that really gives you an option, a really great possibility for that to work out. I mean, those backup offers, those at least have the likelihood of working out, the same likelihood as if you're in a multiple offer situation, which almost always those types of properties are. If you're one of 15 people throwing an offer in on a property at the same time, you're probably, the odds are that you're going to actually get it and that's going to get to closing and whatnot. Those aren't very great odds. And I would say you at least have the same odds of submitting a backup offer of that getting to the closing table for you as you do when you're submitting offers into a multiple offer situation. So it's really a great option, a great strategy. And we don't always have these types of success stories to tell, but this was a great one that had a lot of unique twists and turns. In the end, it ended up really working out and really being a great one. And if you have any questions about the backup offer system and how that works and how backup contracts work, go ahead and listen to that episode. That one, we kind of hashed out some of the details. If you'd like to talk about it more in person, maybe there's a property that you see that's like, you know what, I really like that property, and I don't see anything else like it. I would like to submit a backup on it, even though it's under contract. I would be more than happy to discuss that with you, to discuss what your options are there, what type of leverage you might have, what the likelihood is of that working out. Obviously, some of this is done just realtor to realtor, so I always call the realtor to get the inside scoop. A lot of them are amenable to sharing details because, hey, they love, if you're the listing agents love backup contracts as well. That means that they don't have to put the home back on the market if the one that they have falls through, and that gives them tons of leverage to be able to, you get a situation like this where a buyer starts getting flaky, you say, hey, man, we've already got a backup contract in hand. We're not going to dilly-dally around with you here. If you can't close the deal, we're moving on to the next guy. So that is definitely something you need to keep in your tool chest. Make sure whatever realtor that you're using. Listen, I know that some of y'all, I'm sure, are listening to this. Actually, I know for a fact that there are some people that listen to this that use other realtors. I do not take that personally. Make sure that your realtor understands these types of things. That's something that is important. It's important that they have these types of things in their toolbox because they can come in handy and really make or break a deal. That's all for today's episode. Again, if you have any questions or any comments, please feel free to reach out to me. All my contact information is in the show notes. And until next time, stay safe.